We wouldn't be here without the amazing support from IncuHive, who have a superb new location at Helm Mills, Basingstoke, offering everything from a virtual office address to dedicated offices, all with brilliant business support. Find out more at incuhive.co.uk. We've been catching up with Basingstoke MP Luke Murphy. He answered some of your questions, and thank you for sending those in. He also talked about the potential of a leadership battle in the Labour Party and what he sees as Basingstoke's future.
About Basingstoke.
Before we get onto the politics, which we must talk about, of course, and I always think it's really important that we know more about our local representatives than just their politics. You know, what was your background? Because you came into Parliament a couple of years ago. Presumably you had a life before that.
Yeah, absolutely. So before I was elected, I was lucky enough I worked for a charity on kind of energy, climate and economic issues. So kind of protecting nature and climate change are kind of two issues that I'm kind of really passionate about. And I did that for 8 years. And one of the reasons I did that job was because it was about influencing policy, influencing people like me now for the kind of changes that I wanted to see to protect our environment and tackle climate change. Before that, I worked for the Labour Party for a while, so I was able to work for a number of different MPs, again for similar reasons, kind of attracted to that because of the issues that I care about and want to make a difference on. And then many years ago worked in the financial services sector as well, so I've kind of got a range of experience of working, yes, for the Labour Party, but also financial services and but also a charity as well. But there's always been a theme and one of the reasons I moved on from financial services at the time, while I enjoyed it, it really was what got me up in the morning was working on things that really mattered to me and things I wanted to make a change with. And I think that's how I've ended up doing this, because I wanted to make a change for Basingstoke, improve life for people here, but also work on some of those big national issues that I really care about. I think it's important to say, whatever politician, whatever MP for whatever party, and councillors as well, my overwhelming, and I mean, there are exceptions, of course, but my overwhelming view of the vast majority of people that get involved in politics, that stands to represent their area, are doing it for the right reasons. I will probably fundamentally disagree with some who stand for the Reform Party or Conservatives or Greens about different issues, but by and large, most people get in it because they care about an issue, because they care about an area, and they want to make a change, and that I do feel that is the fundamental motivator of most people that get involved in politics.
So it was 2 years ago that you entered that famous building. And I imagine there's a steep learning curve of how things are done here. I bet you heard that a lot.
It has been a steep learning curve. I mean, as I said, I'd worked for MPs before, so I kind of knew to a degree about how different things in Parliament worked. I understood the flow of legislation and different, what a committee, a select committee looks like, which MPs sit on to scrutinise certain departments. So to a degree, I had certain knowledge, but nothing really quite prepares you for, I think, the kind of avalanche of correspondence you get from all sorts of organisations all across the country who, in their own way, are trying to make a change and lobbying to make a difference, as well as the kind of really important and first the primary responsibility is from my constituents and the issue and the whole range of issues that everyone cares about locally, and then, as you say, mixing that in with the kind of the rules and what you can do and can't do in Parliament. I mean, learning that for some debates you kind of have to stand up and down for 6 hours. I don't think people realise if you want to speak in a debate, you have to be there the entire time, and I understand why, because you need to hear the arguments of other people in order to respond to them. But it does sometimes mean sitting in Parliament for 6 hours.
Wow. And
you literally have to stand up and down after the previous person has finished speaking for 6 hours. In order to continue to what's called catch the eye of the speaker, to be able to speak, and also things like you're not allowed to call someone from the other benches you, because if you use the word you're actually talking to the speaker, because you're talking in Parliament through the speaker. So I was told off recently by Lindsay Hoyle, the House of Commons Speaker, who reminded me that I should know better 2 years in. But I am pleased to see sometimes that members that have been elected for even longer than I have, for 20 years, that still sometimes make that mistake. But it can be frustrating sometimes, but some of those traditions are there for a reason. I think show respect to what is often called the mother of all parliaments.
Well, let's talk about some questions that people have sent in locally. So Andy from Buckskin asks about the local government reorganisation. Obviously, the Northern Hampshire Unitary Authority merging Basingstoke and Dean, Hart and Rushmore due to come in the next couple of years. What assurances, Andy says, can you give residents that local accountability, so I guess he means for Basingstoke, won't be diluted in that transition? And what role did you play in shaping the decision to become a unitary authority?
So firstly, I think it's a really good question from Andy, because I think a lot of people are kind of asking that question about what it will mean for them. I think it is a big opportunity. The role that I played, just to say, and I did push for what is proposed, the North Hampshire Authority, which will bring together Basingstoke and Dean, Hart and Rushmore, because I thought that was the right geographical footprint for us. I think and I worked with cross-party, with Lib Dem MPs and Labour MPs who also thought it was the right way, with the independent leadership of the council and the Labour group here in Basingstoke as well, to push for that model. It will bring a lot of services closer, actually, to residents. When you think about highways and potholes, which is one of the big things that's raised with me, when you think about social care, when you think about education and special educational needs, that's delivered Hampshire-wide at the moment. That's going to be brought closer to residents in Basingstoke, which I think is important. And it's also going to be more joined up. At the moment, and I completely understand why, but a lot of people don't know what different services different councils provide. So they don't know that Basingstoke and Dean deals with planning while Hampshire deals with highways. Now, because they're done by two different institutions, too often one of the things that gets raised is, well, why have you done this development and not? But you haven't got this crossing. And things like that. So that's going to bring more joined up services, which I think is right. It's going to be more efficient for local people, but crucially it will still be accountable locally. So firstly, more services will be delivered more locally, as I said, like education and social care, but you're also still going to have those councillors rooted in their local wards, representing their local areas and being the voice of local people. And obviously, as we sort of transition to the new authority, I will push to ensure that the right accountability mechanisms in place, and will still be a champion for Basingstoke in every area in the constituency, to ensure that I'm holding the new authority to account, just as I do Hampshire and Basingstoke and Dean at the moment.
Okay, you mentioned housing. Claire in Beggarwood says the Borough Council's been pushing back against central government house building targets, arguing that schools, GP surgeries, roads, sewerage, they all need to catch up before more homes are built. Do you side with your constituents on slowing the rate?
So Claire's absolutely right that you need to build houses, not just houses, but places. And that means ensuring that, yes, you're building homes, but you're doing it with the sewage and the water system in place. And, it is overstretched at the moment. That you do it with GP services, that you do it with education and the transport links. Since being elected, those are some of the biggest things that I've worked on. Worked on GP access for too long. We were building homes through what's called speculative development in Basingstoke, because there wasn't a local plan in place, and developer contributions that was arising from that, where developers would pay into a pot to provide infrastructure, wasn't being spent on GP infrastructure like it is everywhere else. And that's something I've pushed for, and I'm really pleased to see progress, money going over, I think, £1.5 million out of developer contributions going to be going to Chinham practice, which was particularly overstretched, because one of the barriers there was just the capacity of the building. And I also secured funding nationally to do that as well, or pushing for schools additional provision as part of Manydown, primary and secondary. So I completely agree, it has to be with infrastructure, and that's also what the government's planning reforms is looking at delivering as well. I think I would gently push back on the idea that siding with constituents means not building more homes, or however you want to put it. I meet families where the kids are living at home for longer, and that has an impact on mum and dad. Maybe mum and dad don't want to avoid being empty nesters, but many actually would like to see their kids go out into the world and they can get on with their lives. But also it has a massive impact on those kids. It might impact on whether they can get a job, whether they can move to the place where they need to work. It's really impacting, as we're seeing in all the kind of statistics, about whether they're able to start a family, whether they're actually able to really start their own lives as a couple, as a family. And we need more homes. We do need more homes as a country. Absolutely, we've got to do it in the right way with that infrastructure and also protecting the nature and our beautiful green spaces. And I think you can build homes and enhance nature at the same time. So I think you've got to do the things together. Like, the population is growing, there is a need for housing. And if you look at the cost of housing, it was 4 times wages. The average price of a home in the 90s in Basingstoke is now 9 times. And one of the ways to tackle that is through housing supply. Does that come with challenges? Absolutely. But you need to do all of it together, I think.
There's another question on housing, actually. Here's a big topic. Lisa in Southam asks about social housing in Basingstoke and the poor condition that some of the housing's in. Is there more, she says, that can be done to force housing associations to ensure that homes are in good condition and that repairs are done quickly and properly?
So firstly, I think Lisa's absolutely right. My mailbag, or mailbox rather, is less. I get fewer letters through now. It's more emails. Is full, actually, of people not receiving the standard of repairs and maintenance that they deserve. I don't think it's good enough. And what does that look like? That means people waiting for months, years, actually, quite often, for adaptations. They might have a disability. Maybe they need a new form of shower or kind of accessibility bars to help them get around their home. Some waiting for damp and mould to be fixed, for broken windows. I've met people who've had leaks coming through the ceiling that kind of mean their kids have had to move out the bedroom, and they've had to wait not hours, not days, but weeks, and in some cases months for something proper to be done about it. And then quite often, or too often, the repair that's done isn't good enough, the problem comes back, and there's just this kind of revolving thing where people just are stuck in a system where it's their home and they're not getting what they deserve, and they're not able to it's a massive impact on them and their families. So I don't think it's good enough. The way in which we address that is individually. I've got really good casework teams, small but mighty. They get an awful lot done, and we've got dozens and dozens of cases where we've helped residents. There was an elderly woman recently who had a particular issue with her roof leaking, damp and mould. We got the housing association involved. They recognised they hadn't tackled it properly. It was escalated, and now a plan is put in place to remediate that. We've got lots of cases like that, and we will continue to do that. But I also sort of aggregate that information as well to be able to take it to the leadership of housing associations and say, look, it's not good enough. I think Sovereign Group locally, we've seen that the social housing regulator has recognised that actually the service they're providing isn't good enough. So I raise it with that leadership there, and also raising it with ministers, and that's something I'm going to continue to do and be more vocal about, because I think that's a consistent picture I've seen since being elected, is people just not getting the support and the repairs and the standard that you expect. That as I said, has a massive impact on their lives.
Absolutely. Now, the other thing you mentioned that we got a lot of people saying about was health and GPs and dental appointment waiting times. This is Katie in Popley, who says they remain a serious concern across Basingstoke. Given that you've engaged heavily with the Department of Health, what specific commitments have you secured for improving primary care capacity in the Basingstoke constituency?
So, firstly, thanks to Katie for her question. I think that's probably I talked about mailbag on kind of social housing repairs, but in terms of across surgeries, things that gets raised on the door, access to GPs is probably one of the biggest issues. There's a national problem, there has been a national problem that we inherited from the previous government around the NHS, and it is a bit of a political point, but I think the NHS have been running to the ground, and that had a massive impact on people's access to what is the front door of the health service, the GP access, which also had an impact on our A&E services and our hospitals. And it's particularly acute in Basingstoke. As I said, there's a national problem, but there's also the issue of we've had a lot of development. We haven't had those things in place, as I said earlier, around the investment in increasing the capacity of the estate. So she's right to raise it. It's one of the biggest things I've worked on. How have I done that? First, I've tried to listen, so held bigger NHS events with residents, roundtables with GPs and local healthcare providers and dentists, and I meet regularly with the Integrated Care Board and the Chief Executive of the hospital. I actually met the Chief Executive of the hospital earlier today to talk about what they're doing to tackle the issues. Specifically, the government has done a number of things. So firstly, as a result of lobbying from MPs like myself, new GP contract to increase access to GP services, £500 million more into the GP contract in 1 year alone. That's a kind of record funding. Changing the way in which they provide the services, so some much greater accessibility online, so people to be able to book services online, but also crucially ensuring that people can still use the phone and still walk in and get that appointment as well, because for whatever reason a lot of people aren't able to use or not confident using online technology, and also ensuring that if people have an urgent appointment, that is recognised and they should be able to get a same day appointment as well. And then locally, as I mentioned, lobbying to get that money for Chinham surgery to upgrade within the practice so that they can reconfigure and provide more consultation space. The money from developers, which helps secure through the council to expand Chinham practice. I'm working really hard with all of the stakeholders involved on Winklebury Health Centre. And this is one of the things I recognised when I first got elected. Unfortunately, and this is part of my role, because in a lot of areas as an MP, people might not know this, but you don't actually have a budget to spend to improve particular services. A lot of what I do is about convening, being the voice of residents to ministers and in government, but also with agencies locally. So many people just did not speak together. So part of my role since I've been elected has been to bring together the Integrated Care Board that commissions GP services, the GP services themselves, the local council, developers, to talk to them about, okay, knock heads together and say, like, how are we going to get this done to deliver a better service for residents? That's what I'm trying to do in Winklebury, because a health centre there has been long overdue, and we've got a big development at Many Down, and I want to see that health centre in Winklebury as well. So action done, kind of got secured money for Chinham, the national contract, and I raise individual cases around GP appointments with the ICB on a regular basis. But there's, I'm not absolutely not job done. There's a lot more to do to provide provision across the board, but also secure more funding to expand healthcare as well. And finally, the neighbourhood health initiative which the government has introduced, part of the 10-year health plan, to put more healthcare into the community. Been working a lot with different stakeholders on that, and there should be more about that in the coming months that hopefully we can talk about. But that's all about providing more healthcare closer to where people live.
So there's a lot going on, and the test will always be whether people can get those appointments that they want. And obviously, there is still an ongoing struggle with that. People are still having to make those phone calls at 8 o'clock in the morning trying to get appointments. Yes, you can book appointments online, but some surgeries are better than others in what they provide on that. So there's a lot of things to do. And unfortunately, when people can't get a GP appointment, they tend to end up at A&E, which puts more pressure on the hospital. And that leads into a question from Jeff in Hatch Warren, who said, why have we still not got new hospital facilities, considering the town is growing and our hospital services other towns? I mean, if you go along the A303, you'll see the ambulances whizzing up and down from Andover, for example, and Winchester changing the provision of hospital services. So that's going to mean more people coming to Basingstoke.
So Jeff's right, we do need a new hospital. And I think, to be blunt, what was promised previously was just unfair. So the previous government promised 40 hospitals within a completely impossible timeline, with no money allocated and no plan. And that's what we found when we got elected. They were promising the fastest hospital building programme, I think, anywhere in the world. And when we got elected, it was quite clear there was no plan or money allocated in order to deliver that. And I think that expectation that people had, and that promise was, the expectation was understandable, but the promise was wrong. So the government has had to reassess and put in a proper timeline for what that will mean. It does mean that we won't be seeing a new hospital, as the government's already announced, started to be built in Basingstoke till at least mid-2030s. And I know that is a long time, and I will continue to work as hard as I can to expedite that timeline. But the government's trying to do it so that it's, unbelievably, there are worse hospitals elsewhere, and we can't build them all at once. But I will continue to be a voice for Basingstoke to ensure that we get it built here as quickly as possible, because it is needed. we've already made some progress that wasn't made under the previous government. Money allocated and then used to purchase the land for the prospective site at Junction 7. I think it's really important to secure that for the future, and I will continue to try and push to get that timeline as early as possible. But I think it also is people need to see improvements in their healthcare now and provision now. We have seen some positives. So we've seen elective care. So for those planned operations and surgeries at the hospital, like we've seen across the country, we've seen record falls in the waiting list, which is really positive.
Just on the waiting list, I mean, to some degree, it's a bit of a red herring because the numbers on waiting lists and the ones that are often quoted are the number of appointments. That can be one person with multiple appointments, so that sort of changes the figures slightly. But also, if people are getting seen, and I know from personal experience from people who've said, oh, okay, suddenly I've got the appointment that I was being told I've got to wait 18 months for. Big tick for the government there. But once they've had that appointment and they've been removed from the stats of somebody waiting, the next bit, the actual treatment or the follow-up appointment, that doesn't appear. So there's a little bit of manipulation of the numbers there, aren't there?
Well, I think my understanding of the statistic is that people are being seen sooner and are having treatment sooner. There will always be a degree of, I'm sure, of that happening under whatever government there is, but I think there has been improvements, partly because we've put an awful lot of money into the NHS. We've taken decisions that other, frankly, parties have massively opposed.
But does the money not? The money needs to come with change, and it needs to be a more efficient organisation.
I completely agree. And there's quite high expectations of the hospital. I know from meeting the chief exec about efficiencies which they need to make sure it's a more efficient organisation, to make sure it's delivering for patients, and also, frankly, so we're not spending so much money in hospitals. As I said earlier, the government's 10-year plan is all about more community care, improving the front doors to the NHS, so fewer people, as you said, are ending up in an A&E, and also improving social care, because at the moment there are dozens and dozens and dozens of people probably at Basingstoke Hospital today that probably don't need to be there and that could actually be in a different care setting. So it's about improving the whole of the health service. But I think one of the other things just to mention that gets raised with me around the A&E, because that's one of the big issues at the hospital at the moment. The targets there are not being met. They haven't been met for some time, for about 5-6 years. And I don't think they're good enough. I know that there is a plan in place and investment has been provided by the government to reconfigure that, to ensure that the patient experience is better and bring those waiting lists down. And that's something that I will be looking to see improvements for, and supporting them in anything else that they need from government to deliver. So kind of going back to Jeff's question, yes, we need a new hospital. Incidentally, for the people providing care in the hospital, and they work, just to say, the staff of the hospital work so hard to provide the very best care that they can. They deserve a better hospital, as do patients. But we've also got to improve care in the here and now. And that's what the leadership and I'm focused on, to ensure that people see better care, quicker care, and the care that, frankly, they have every right to expect from the NHS.
Gary in Old Basing says Reform took nearly 13% of the vote in Basingstoke at the 2024 general election and has picked up support in local councils. What does Labour need to do differently to speak to voters who are attracted to Reform's message on immigration, public services and political trust?
I mean, I think first thing to say, I hear whatever party people voted for at the local elections, and it was clear that people wanted to send a message, and quite a strong one, to the government, whether they voted for Reform or Greens or other parties. I think people are doing that understandably, because they see, we've had a living standards crisis for 20 years. People's living ability to buy the basics for some, or just have any kind of luxuries or social, be able to afford just a nice evening out or whatever, has been constrained, and people's living standards have suffered for 20 years, and our public services were on the knees, frankly, from under the Conservative we inherited, and they want to see those changes happen quicker. I recognise that. I think we've done a lot of good stuff over the last 2 years. We need to show how that's actually changing. The workers' rights package we've introduced to upgrade, give people more sick pay and paternity pay, more security if you're a renter, the economic growth figures we've just seen, some of the record fall in waiting lists. we have made progress, but I understand the massive frustration I think I hear is that people voted for change and they don't yet see that, and it's not happening quick enough. And I think we have made mistakes. Things like winter fuel, I don't think was the right decision, and I think the government has recognised that. So we've made mistakes, and we need to learn from those. And every government will make mistakes. The important thing is how you change after that. We need to communicate about what we're doing, but also I think fundamentally people need to see the change happening quicker. And I wake up every day, as I think all my Labour colleagues do, thinking about how can we push that change faster? How can we get government to go quicker? Whether it's improving public services, tackling the cost of living, or building a fair and controlled immigration system, which is some of the reasons why people are voting for others. I would say we are taking action on all of those things. People need to see the evidence. Some of that will take time to feed through, but we also need to work harder to ensure that they see the change quicker as well.
And also the messaging, which I think has not been great, and the media are very good at seizing on particular things, and they will always seize on the negative things. You mentioned the winter fuel. The other big one, of course, which given that we've had the figures, or the report rather, the Milburn report, about 1 million people, young people who are not in education or working, a big chunk of that is going to be people who are not able to find those entry-level jobs because of the national insurance hike for employers. Do you accept that? Because I hear some of your colleagues trying to say that isn't the case, but it absolutely is. When you talk to businesses, they are not hiring people because of that.
Firstly, just on the message, I think it needs to be more hopeful, and people need to have a clear sense of the country we're trying to build. And for me, it's one that's it's affordable, where they can they have good access to public services, and they can be proud of the places that they live. So not fewer potholes, and they're top of town. Here in Basingstoke or High Street is thriving. They need to hear more of that. Some of the decisions we have taken have been difficult. It is having an impact on businesses. I don't think it's the sole driver. The change in national insurance, for example, doesn't apply to those taking on an apprentice or someone that's up to the age of 21. So, and there is a multitude of reasons. Is it having an impact? Absolutely. But there are, there's a whole range of economic conditions that impact and make it, make it about whether an employer will take someone on board. But we need to listen to that feedback and figure out what more we can do to support young people into work. That's why we've got the youth guarantee, which will pay employers to take young people on, guaranteeing that young people are either in employment, education, or training. I think that's really important. We need to reconfigure the welfare system as well, as Alan Milburn's report that you just mentioned highlighted, because the welfare system should be there to absolutely support those who need it and will never be able to work, but it should also be supporting people to get back into work, because ultimately that's how most people will be able to realise their opportunity and talents. And too many people end up spending too much time out of work, and we all know, all the evidence is, the further you are away from work, the longer you're out of work, the further you are in terms of your skill set. So we need to address that. And there are also other big threats we've got to address as well, like artificial intelligence. That is another thing that is impacting, not in hospitality, but in other areas of the job market, whether people are taken on, because some of those skill sets and some of the things, tasks that they were doing are now beginning to be automated through AI. And that is a huge challenge that the government has got to confront and make sure we've got a skilled system, an apprenticeship system, to provide young people and others who are going to be affected by this huge change. There's huge opportunity in that, but there's also huge risk, and we've got to make sure that people benefit, not just a few people that kind of control or build AI systems as well.
Yeah, I think the frustration I hear from people who run businesses, particularly small businesses, is that things are often talked about in silos. Mm-hmm. So, you mentioned, for example, the different way that national insurance applies to the youngest adult workers up to the age of 21. Yes, that's great, but very few businesses only employ people of those ages. So if everyone over 21, they're paying more employers' national insurance for, they just cannot afford to take on anybody, even if there's no extra national insurance for those under 21s. They can't afford to pay them because they're struggling to even run their own business.
Yeah. And I'm not going to shy away from the fact that I know it's had an impact and it is a challenge, but the government also faced a challenge, because one of the big parts of our manifesto and one of the big themes of this conversation has been about public services. We had a crisis for the NHS, GPs, hospitals, every part of the NHS struggling, hospices, They're not technically part of the NHS, but they provide really important care, social care. Look at education, special educational needs and disabilities, huge deficits, £6 billion worth of deficits in councils across the country, kids and families fighting to get the support that they need and deserve. The government has to take difficult decisions in order to raise the money to invest in those public services that people rely on and that businesses rely on. They rely on having healthy employees that aren't having a mental health crisis or suffering from their mental health. I mean, lots of people will, but because they haven't, but it's made worse because they can't get access to a GP or the right mental health services. So businesses and everyone will benefit from that investment. I don't hide from the fact that it was a difficult choice, and the government will always look for ways to further support businesses, to protect them, to invest in them and make sure that they can grow. We did see some positive GDP figures despite all the forecasts. The IMF uprated our forecast for growth in the economy a few weeks ago, and it showed that we're the fastest growing economy in the G7, and that isn't to be sniffed at. Is that growth figure enough? No, we want it to be higher, and that's why our central mission is growth, to deliver the public services and everything that we've talked about. But we're not making those decisions for no reason at all. It is to actually do things that are badly needed, like picking our public services up off the floor, and people would expect a Labour government to do that, even if it means some difficult choices. But I accept we need to find other ways to support businesses, which I try and do locally as well, setting up the first ever Basingstoke Business Week last year, which I was really proud to do with lots of partners. We'll be doing it again this year, indeed with a focus on local businesses and skills as well, because I want more businesses to invest and to attract them into Basingstoke as well. And I'm always happy to go out and talk to businesses, and I think I'm doing 2 business visits today, listening to them about the issues that they want to raise, and then I will take them back to government as well.
Before we finish, the elephant in the room this week, Tony Blair's essay. Obviously, there's a by-election coming up in the Northwest. There's all talk about whether that will then trigger a leadership change, or certainly a bid to change the leadership. Tony Blair's assertion is that there's no point changing the leadership unless the policies change. Do you think that maybe Keir Starmer gets a lot of the blame for things when actually it's just the policies that are wrong?
So there's been lots of essays written over the past week by Tony Blair and others responding to Tony Blair. I think where Tony Blair was right was about, I think he's right about the story and the hopeful vision that you need to talk about for the country, and we've touched a bit on that, and we need to do more of that. People need to understand where we're going and why. I think actually, as I said earlier, acknowledge we have made mistakes, but we have a good policy programme that is the right one for the country, for investment and reform in public services. I think that was absolutely central. Making the changes that we're making on SEND, the 10-year plan for the NHS, the plans that we have for reforming and investing in defence. Wherever you look, I think we've got a good policy programme that is going to help renew the country and do the things and deliver the change that people want to see. I think for all the speculation that we've seen, actually one of the best essays was one by Keir himself that set out what the mission of the government is, to build a more productive economy, ones that recognises and gives support to working people. I've mentioned a lot around the cost of living crisis, reforming up and investing in our public services. That's what we need to be focused on. That's what I'm focused on, and I kind of urge all my colleagues to focus on as well, because ultimately what most people care about, I think you're right in the sense of, in one way, I don't agree that all the policies are wrong. I think we have the right policy programme, but what people ultimately care about is the outcomes that they see. Can they see a GP? Can they send their child to a good school? Can they get a job and ensure that that we live in a meritocratic society where whatever background you come from, wherever you grew up, you have an opportunity to realise your talent and get on in life. That's what most people care about, and that's what we're focused on delivering.
So do you think Keir Starmer will still be the the leader of the Labour Party and Prime Minister by Christmas, or will he be on Strictly, or what?
I'm definitely not sure that we're going to see Keir on Strictly.
We'd see a different side to him, maybe the side that people want to see.
Look, I think Keir's focused on the job. That's what I'm focused on at the moment. It's difficult for me to speculate about what's going to happen after the by-election. I've been up to Makerfield, and he's got a good connection with people on the doorstep. I think it's really good to see him as part of the team. I personally, I don't think it's useful. I was clear. I didn't think now was the right time for a leadership contest. Now is the right time to be focused on what people want, which is to see the change in their everyday lives and the change that they voted for, less than 2 years ago.
Let's end on a positive for Basingstoke then. What do you see the immediate to medium term future for Basingstoke? How do you see things going?
So I think we've got a really positive story to tell about Basingstoke. We're seeing that there are things that we need to do differently and things that need to improve. But take the top of town, we're seeing new independent businesses opening up because of the investment we're putting in. We're seeing more police patrols in the top of town, which people wanted to see. We're seeing greater footfall in Festival Place. We've got a fantastic story to tell about our small to medium-sized businesses. We're bidding for the Town of Culture. I was really proud to bring together, I think it was up to maybe 80 stakeholders at the Anvil to talk about our bid. I want over the next year, 2 years to bring more investment, more businesses, and to really sell Basingstoke as the great place to live and work, which I think it is. And I want people to see, and I hope people will, I'm confident that they will, that over the next year they will see that they've got better access to their GPs, that they're seeing improvements in public services. They're seeing, I'm not going to rule out that they're not going to be able to spot a pothole in a year's time, but they're going to see fewer potholes. So hopefully a story of things improving that people care about and that they get in touch with me about, but also a sense of pride in Basingstoke, which I think we should all feel. I think sometimes we do ourselves down, some of the things that are said about Basingstoke, and I want to kind of change that story and work with others to do that, because I think it is genuinely one of the best places to live, if not the best place to live in the country, and we should be really proud of that and celebrate it, and that's what I'm going to continue to do with whoever would like to do that with me for as long as I can.
Brilliant, Luke. Hopefully we can do this again. If people want to have some time with you to discuss issues, how do they get in touch?
So we do lots of engagement events. We do policy-based events. So I've mentioned some of them already around particular issues, which they can find on my website, and we will email people if they've contacted us about it. We've done some on the NHS, on education and others. I do surgery once a fortnight or more regularly if needed, where people can come and talk to me about individual issues. Again, can email, ring or find on my website. And I also do coffee afternoons once a month around the constituency in different areas where people are welcome to come to their local one or one in another area if they can't do that. And I also knock doors more or less every Saturday morning, if not more often. So I can't tell people exactly where I'll be, but I will be out somewhere in the constituency, and hopefully I'll knock on some of your listeners' doors soon. So lots of ways to get in touch. And if they don't want to do any of that, they can just drop me an email.
You've been thinking about launching a podcast, and it's a great way to promote your business. But where do you start? You have so many questions. What equipment do you need? How long should an episode be? How do you get listed on Spotify? About Basingstoke is the answer. We're professional audio producers with decades of experience. We can advise you on your podcasting strategy, record your episodes, or show you how to do it yourself, get you listed on all the major platforms, and help you understand audience building and ways to turn listeners into leads. Find out more at aboutbasingstoke.com/podcasts. Oh, and if you think you have to do video because who listens to audio these days? Well, you're listening to this, aren't you? Get professional podcast advice and production. Visit aboutbasingstoke.com/podcasts.